Great. Okay. Well,
Take
thank
it
you
away.
so much, Dorothy, and welcome everybody. I am delighted to be here. I love talking about residencies, and it comes up a lot in my conversations. Thank you to the ACOR Board of Directors, Lily Greenberg, and the other board members, and the Professional Development Committee. Um, I love the chat on Zoom, and so please feel free to, say your name, where you're located, and the arts that you're involved in that you might want to pursue a residency for. Um, and any questions that you have, and we will cover those at the end if we don't hit on them during our conversation. Um, just a few remarks. This is a panel that's an outcome of a lot of conversations I've had over the years with fellow poets and other writers, other artists. Um, and it always seems to start with why? Why should I go? Especially for people who work from home. Or how can I go? I've got children, I have responsibilities, I've got a job. How do I do it? And there's going to be a lot of resources for you that we will have links to. So there'll be information that you can access, certainly for anything that we're not going to cover today, because we could be here all week. It is a vast landscape. But since we can't cover everything, there's certain things I want you to be aware of is that there are all kinds of residencies. We tend to think of them, I think of a place out in the country somewhere, out in nature, on 100 acres, and we're there for, a month. But there are ones that actually happen from your own home, believe it or not, on Zoom. Um, there are 1 day residencies and there are week-long residencies. And yes, there are ones that are a month and much longer. There are ones that are geared for parents. There are ones that are fully funded and ones that are not. Um, there are ones with one kind of artist. Everyone is a poet or a painter. And then there's ones where it's mixed genre. There are ones in the US and ones all over the world. So part of the trick, which I'm sure we'll touch on, is sort of it's matchmaking. What are your needs and what do you really want to access from a residency? Why are you going? And why that particular residency? Um, just a tip for you, which is that I discovered in preparation of this, which is if you're on Instagram, but this might be true of any number of platforms, and you put in artist residencies as a search, you will then, thanks to algorithms, get every possible kind of residency coming through on your thread. Um, and one of the things we will talk about is which are the legitimate ones or ones that are worth pursuing, because it is a little overwhelming. And if you're not familiar with the name, or if you don't know people who have gone, it's like, am I going to someone's creepy house? Like, what is this? So that's my first tip. The other thing is that we are going to touch on personal statements today a bit and perhaps portfolios. I'm sure Courtney has a lot to say about that, as will Kim, who's obviously written some really dynamic ones. But there's a lot of information about it online as well as sort of, what makes a good personal statement, how to put your portfolio together. And that in and of itself might be something that we'll do as part of our professional development presentations in the future. Okay, without further ado, I would love to introduce our two panelists. Courtney Bethel is the admissions director at MacDowell, a contemporary leader in the field of artist residency programs, whose mission has been advancing artistic freedom since 1907. For 25 years, she has guided the application experience for artists. Bethel's responsibilities include overseeing nearly 5,000 applications a year and coordinating a selection process that fields rotating admissions panels in 7 disciplines. In her free time, Courtney enjoys reading, long walks, and spending time with her family. Kim Coleman Foote is the author of Coleman Hill, named a finalist for the Carol Shields Prize and the NAACP Image Award, among others. Born and raised in New Jersey, Kim has received writing fellowships from the NEA, NIFA, the Center for Fiction, and residencies at MacDowell, Yaddo, and Hedgebrook, among others. Her second novel, Saltwater Sister, is forthcoming in 2027. I can't wait. From Sarah Jessica Parker's imprint at Zando, which explores the slave trade and reparations in Ghana. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's start with the basics. And we're going to start with Courtney. What is an artist residency?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having us tonight. It's such a pleasure to see you and Kim to see you back again. It's been a minute, but it's great to see your faces. An artist residency, as you indicated, is it can be a number of things, but it comes in all shapes and sizes. But the basic concept is providing time and space for artists to work on a creative project. That's kind of how we simplify it here at MacDowell, but certainly it's about providing that time and space and support for working on your practice.
And Kim, can you address what the difference is between a fellowship and a residency? I think there's some crossover, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all different types of terms. I've done a little bit of everything at this point. So fellowships are typically longer.
Mm.
So I've done two long-term fellowships, which are almost a year each. And there's very few of those that exist, at least in this country. There's only about, I would say there's probably less than 10 of them total that are like year long and fully funded. Um, but you can also get a fellowship for something like, well, maybe not MacDowell, but like there are residencies that offer or that require tuition.
Mhm.
And you can get a fellowship to cover tuition. Sometimes they give extra stipends to cover travel, food, if it's not provided, things like that.
Are
But
they,
in general, I consider a fellowship like a longer term opportunity.
it's a little different than a scholarship, yeah? I mean, it often comes with
Um,
teaching or that there's some other component to it. And Courtney jumped.
Okay. Yeah, so that gets into the different categories. So, for example, one of the year-long fellowships that I was thinking of, there's one I think in Wisconsin, and it's a teaching related fellowship, but then I've done the Bennett Fellowship at Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, also in New Hampshire. And it's basically almost a year. It's an academic year at the private boarding school, Exeter. And I was basically the writer in residence for that term. So I was considered like one of the faculty in terms of benefits and things like that. But there were really minimal expectations. I mean, I think the only expectation was that I think one or two public readings for their community. Otherwise, they said, we don't really check on you. You can go to the beach every day if you wanted to. It's 20 minutes away. You can take a walk in the woods, whatever you need to do to restore, get dental work. You have full, dental medical insurance. But also if you can create your work, your writing while you're there, beautiful, right? But yeah, I think of opportunities like that when they say the term fellowship, though I did have I guess it was called a fellowship. So I was at Vermont Studio Center
Yeah.
and the Rona Jaffe Foundation sponsored fellowships, to cover again a month-long stay at Vermont Studio Center. So you do see that word connected with some residencies, even though like scholarship, fellowship, interchangeable to me.
You see them on people's bios. Well, I see them all
Yeah.
the time, and it made me wonder. So I had done a little research on because also, like I've been referred to as a fellow for some. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it's like this funny thing. I mean, there is also sort of strict, academic fellowships, and that's a little different.
Yeah, I was also a Fulbright fellow, but it's not really, there's a Fulbright scholarship and Fulbright fellow.
Right.
Ultimately, I would say forget about the terminology.
Yeah.
The most important thing is funded versus not funded. And usually when you see any term like fellowship or scholarship, it just means that there's some money
Yeah.
attached.
Money attached
That's
to.
exactly what I was going to add was that I think of fellowship. We actually use the term interchangeably at MacDowell
Okay.
because our residencies are funded. So
Yeah.
Mm,
the experience
yeah.
includes the accommodations, the food, and then we also have stipends and travel grants that artists can
Yes.
apply for. But I think of fellowship generally comes with some sort of financial support.
Yeah. I think
And like Kim mentioned, there are places like Vermont Studio Center where you can have kind of a residency and then you can have a fellowship, and there's a difference because one I think you have to pay and one you don't. So yeah, it's interesting that the
And
terminology.
MacDowell residents are considered MacDowell
We
fellows,
do call
right?
them fellows.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I was
yeah.
laughing because
Yeah.
once a fellow, always a fellow. That's kind of our famous
Yeah.
line. Yeah.
you think residencies are perceived. Someone had said to me, is there sort of a value to it to have on a resume? And Dorothy was talking to me about that. So how are they viewed? I included on my bio, you've just heard it. This they seems to carry some kind of weight to it, which is very interesting to me. So, Courtney, do you want to address that first, or?
I mean, sure. From my perspective, I'm not an artist, so I feel a little funny. But what I hear regularly
Yeah.
is it's about that opportunity to connect with other artists, and the value is it can be so broad. It can be it can be anything from having time to work on the project and having that kind of solitude, but it's also about the community. It's about the friendships that are made. It's about being validated as an artist. Sometimes people leave MacDowell and they say, I never felt like I was truly an artist until I was in this community. It can be about career advancement. You might make connections while you're in residence,
Mhm.
but but this is from my very administrative perspective. So I'd actually love to hear what Kim would say
Yeah, absolutely.
from an artist, how you see it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely put it on my resume. It's definitely an honor for me. But I would also point out that there are different tiers of residencies. So you have like McDowell, for example, there's a tier of residencies where, there is no extra kind of fellowship attached to it. Everyone who gets in, your whole residency is covered, food is covered in that. And so those are kind of the highest tier residencies because obviously they have a lot of financial support to pay for the residents who come. And then the next kind of tier below that is residencies that do charge a fee, but the selection is still really, really competitive. So like a Vermont Studio Center, for example. And then you can have residencies, like anyone can really kind of create a residency. Like I can have a little cabin in my backyard. I wish I did. I don't even have my own backyard, but I could have a cabin, hypothetical cabin in my backyard and say, I'm creating a residency. People can come to stay for a week or whatever, and you pay me whatever. And I don't really vet the applications. You just maybe show that you're working on something and then you pay this money and you come. But I think, it's always worthwhile because even though like obviously if you're applying to something, I've been on panels reviewing residency applications. It's all about the judge's taste, right? But at the same time, there is something to that because you're being judged by your peers, right? And so if you are getting into these, especially the more prestigious ones, it is a mark to say that someone has validated my work, that it is at a certain caliber where I'm considered, you know, able to come here and also able to come here and do independent work. Even though when you get to the residency, I'll never forget my very first residency was at Hedgebrook, which is sorry,
Mm,
Courtney, it's always been my favorite
that's okay.
since,
No
since,
worries.
since 2007, my very first one. I was just like, oh my God, I'm in heaven. Why have I never even known these places exist? For anyone who's on the fence about them, magical experience. It was, I think, 7 women writers in the woods in like an island off the coast of Seattle. And when I got in, I was like, why would I do this? I'm feeling isolated in Chicago in the big city. Why would I choose to spend 8 weeks? I could have done 8 weeks out there and I chose 4. But I had no idea. I was like, why am I going to spend 8 weeks in the middle of the woods? I don't really like nature. I don't like bugs. why am I going to do this? And when I went there, I was like, oh my God, you guys owe me some weeks back because they had to give me, had to reduce it. I think I got 6 weeks originally, something like that. And they re reduced it to 4. And I'm always, this is my running joke to them. I want my 2 weeks back because it was that amazing. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, these are, where was I going with that?
Well, we were talking about sort of the prestige of it, and I want to clarify for those
Yes.
listening, if you don't know, that many residencies, maybe most, are juried. So
Yes.
there's a panel, and you will hear any kind of artist, whether you're a jewelry maker, a painter, a poet, a dancer, talk about the importance of your portfolio, your video, the selection that you send for writing, that at the end of the day, you could have a great personal statement, a good interview, et cetera, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about the work.
Yes.
So I have heard many times. Um, I think the other things matter, but I actually had the opportunity to speak with one of the jury members um, for Bethany Arts, who said, that it was about the work,
Mhm.
and that they enjoyed reading it, and that was what the decision was based on, which is, it's a great thing to hear. Um, so we are going to cover those personal statements and what makes a strong application. But before we do, um, what do you do at a residency? I mean, I say that because people often ask me, so what'd you do there? Is it all work? So Courtney, you want to start, and Kim, jump in for that.
Sure. Again, I feel like Kim's probably better to answer this, but I can share what my experience of
Yeah.
working at a residency program looks like in terms of the artist day. It's not all work. I'm here during dinner, so I can tell you they're having a heck of a good time downstairs right now. I'm a little jealous. I think for the most part, people use the day to work. Some people work at night, and so the studio time, how they want to spend it, is up to them. But we do have meals together in our main dining room, and there are opportunities to share work with one another. We have a fantastic library, so a lot of artists will spend time in the library. We have a very large campus, so walking, going into town, it's all part of the experience. So, again, from a very administrative perspective, it's not all work, but it is predominantly work. But it is also about building community and connection with the other artists and residents.
Yeah, Kim, what do you really do at your residence?
So I remember why I brought up the Hedgebrook example. Long story short, because I can go on tangents and I'm a storyteller. But the first day I got there, they had this binder and it said, "Welcome to Hedgebrook. We know that you've done all this work to apply to get here. You submitted your best sample, but feel free to do nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like take a nap." Go pick some flowers. We got chastised for not picking flowers and eating enough raspberries off the bush. Like, go just sit in the grass, like whatever you want to do. And to me, that was just like, oh my God, it was just so liberating,
Yeah.
because for me, I was actually working 9 to 5 year rounds. No, actually, at that point, I had my summers off with a 9 to 5. But, I was like, oh, they don't expect anything of me.
Mm,
So it kind of gives you this freedom to just literally sit in the grass and, be with nature and have the conversations, parting with people. So like, yes, I've gotten a lot of work done on residencies, in terms of my writing and also just reading and research, but there's a lot of social time, which I value residencies for. Yato, I was in the pool. They didn't say that they had a pool, and I was like, I'm glad I brought my swimsuit. It was summer. I was in the pool, I think, like every couple of days, and I'd always leave notes. Who wants to come to the pool today with me?
mm.
Um, what are some other things? Yes, walks in the woods. I had dental surgery at
Oh my goodness.
I had dental surgery. So like, yeah, but I mean, ultimately, yes, if you want to get work done, it's the ideal place, really ideal.
Yeah, there is something about being given the space just to think or space
Yes.
out.
Yes.
Um, and and if you want to be social, be social. If you don't, you don't.
Hmm.
No, I've been lucky with cohorts, but um, there is something because you can't do that in real life where it's always the pressure that you should be doing something. At least I feel that
Exactly.
way. And so to be given permission to just be and to think
Mhm.
um, is a wonderful gift. What can a person expect to be asked on applications? Kim, why don't you start because you've applied to many. Can you talk a little bit about the process, and then Courtney certainly is knows that process very well.
Sure. So obviously there's your work sample, and it doesn't necessarily have to reflect what you're doing during your residency. They just want to again see, what type of quality work you have, if you're serious about it, et cetera. And typically a personal statement. And I would say maybe like the average length is like 250 to 500 words for that. And then typically, like I know like a lot of residencies used to ask for letters of recommendation in the past, and some have been phasing that out and just asking for like a reference, so whether that's a mentor that you have or a professor or a writing peer, just someone who can vouch for your or whatever art you're doing. Or someone who can just vouch for your personality. Like, is this a person who's, works well in community, even if you're the one who puts the little note on the desk saying, I don't want to talk to anyone right now. Are you a person who can just be with other people and in community? I would say those are the typical component. And then maybe like a resume just with all your teaching, writing, performance, et cetera.
Yeah. Courtney, what makes a strong application from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, readiness to apply is something that we talk a lot about. Knowing that you have an active practice is kind of the key component to applying to anything.
Can
And
I
then, as
interrupt
Kim
you?
noted, those. Sorry.
What I'm going to interrupt you for a
Oh, that's
second.
okay.
That's a really key piece of
Mhm.
Yeah.
this. When you say an active practice, what do you
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean that you have a work sample that you can submit, that you have something you're thinking about. So, Kim mentioned a statement. We call it a project description or a proposal of how you'll use your time. So, what are you thinking about? And a resume. We call them artistic achievements, but it's just a way of saying like, what kind of support have you had so far? Whether you're emerging or you're, anywhere on that spectrum of your career, or established, etc. What do you want to share with the panel about who you are as an artist and what kind of achievements have you had so far? So readiness, really really knowing that you have those kind of three main components. And also the question we added recently to our application, which has been kind of instrumental in our panel discussions, is why now? Why MacDowell
Mhm.
now is the question, but it's literally why would the time at this moment impact you as an artist or your work? And so I think though that's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. Is
Mhm.
there a sense of urgency? And so also just clarity. You asked the question, what makes a good application? Being really clear with your intentions, how you would use the time, why you need it, and making sure that it makes sense. Sometimes I read an application proposal, I'm like, I have no idea what this person wants to do. I can tell they have a
Yeah.
practice and I can tell they have a work sample, but I have no idea
Yeah.
what they actually want to do. So,
I'm, I, one of the questions that comes up a lot that I hear is the difference between writing a project statement or description versus a personal statement. One thing that helped someone I was talking with who had a lot of grant writing in her background was it is not a grant proposal. Because it's especially if you're used to writing grants, it's very easy to sort of pop that out, which is a lot like a project proposal. But that is different than a personal statement. And Kim, can you talk about what makes a personal statement as opposed to a project statement, please?
Yeah, so for me, I personally see overlap between the two, and I always tell people that there's overlap between the two because obviously a personal statement, you're talking about your background as an artist, your development, your interests, passions, things like that. But the project statement, I mean, I guess I would say to back up, you always want to follow the instructions to a T.
Yeah.
Right. And this is coming from me, from my background. I used to work in academic advisement with college students who are applying to study abroad, to internships, so many different opportunities. And I said, the most basic thing you can do, it may seem common sense, but then lots of people just don't do this, is follow the instructions to a T.
Mhm.
So if someone says your personal statement should be 250 words, don't send 300 because you're like, I just want to show how much more I can do. Or if they say your project description has to have X, Y, and Z in it, make sure you include X, Y, and Z and don't put that in a personal statement, But otherwise, like if they're not really clear guidelines, let's say, just here's a project description versus personal statement, there can be overlap because if you're talking about your project, you might have to tell some backstory about yourself and how you decided to become interested in that particular project.
I've always found project statements easier because it's what's in front of you. And it kind of
Yeah.
answers the now to some, to some extent, what's the urgency right now? Although that might be developing something that you've wanted to develop, um,
Yeah.
that isn't yet a project, but that's the
Right.
goal is to have a project, right?
Yeah.
But a personal statement, I think what also, throws me. And I coach people with this, but it's terrifying. It's so much easier to work with somebody else and say, this is what you do, than write your own. Then it gets scary. But it also seems to have something to do with being able to reflect on who you are as an artist, what your vision is, or your stance, if that makes sense. I am someone that I've started to incorporate that I tend to write about grief, loss, health issues, um, systems, I have a sense now of who I am, I think, and that
Hmm.
goes into a personal statement. So, what is sort of, what else goes in there that helps it become exciting and not just
Yeah.
sort of narration of a resume or a CV?
Well, so I have strengths in nonfiction. So that stuff, whether it's project or personal, it comes naturally to me. In fact, I've written memoir as well, so that just comes easily. But for people to whom it doesn't, again, I always go back to my college students who I used to advise because I'd read a lot of their statements applying to different programs and scholarships and whatnot. And the easiest way I can describe it is if you can read a personal statement and you can substitute anyone for you, that means your statement is not personal enough, right?
Yes.
Because everybody, even if you think you're the most boring person on the earth, everybody has a story, everybody has a backstory, a history, a family dynamic, you know, traumas, positive things that you have a life, right? And so you want to get detailed, not necessarily putting out all your business in your personal statement. We don't need like a HIPAA clearance or anything like that to be able to read your statement. But you want to, it's personal, right? So you want to talk about specific details about your life. Why is this topic of interest to you? How did it become of interest to you, right? Why do you like MacDowell? Why do you like Hedgebrook? What is it about these particular places that appeals to you specifically, right? And again, if you could substitute, let's say, your friend or someone who's completely different from you, and it's the same statement, then you need to go back in there and tweak it and make it more personal. Add those details from your life and your experience.
Yeah, I mean, what you sort of bringing up something important here that, I mentioned at the very beginning, which is that matchmaking component. Um, that would you agree that the thrust of whatever you're turning in has to somehow touch on why you're directing this toward MacDowell or Yaddo or wherever you're applying to?
Not necessarily. I don't think so. I mean, Courtney might have other ideas, but yeah, because I mean, the thing about residencies, I mean, I've done a lot. I've done them here, I've done them abroad, and the thing is, you never know what's going to happen at a residency. You never know who's going to be there. I mean, the inspiration you're going to have from the place itself, from the other people that you meet. Sometimes it's your cohort. Like I remember I did one in Belgium, for example, and it was like in the middle of nowhere. It was like this farming town in the middle of like Flanders. Literally, we had cows and like pigs as neighbors and cornfields, and I would just bike past the cornfields and bike pat and I would moo with the cows, like, you know, and just being in that like really like just calm place, and also like the person who ran the residency, it only lasted a couple of years, unfortunately, but she had this amazing, she's a poet and also a novelist. She had this amazing collection of books. And
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many of her books were inspirational for my first
Mhm.
book, Coleman Hill. She'd be like, "Oh, you're talking about this, read this book. Hey, check out this book, check out this." And so many ideas, boom, 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 just came from like her book collection. Or there's other moments of serendipity, like one of my residencies I was at, this was in Minnesota, Anderson Center, which I want to plug Anderson Center because it's like it's like the best known secret of the residency world. When I was like, I even forgot how I heard about it, but then I realized like when a fellow of another program told me about it. And then when I got in, I met some random guy in my elevator who had, I think he had a MacDowell bag. He's a visual artist in Brooklyn. He's like, "Oh, I know Anderson Center. I was there." And I'm like, how are all these people know? But it's in Minnesota. It's for writers and is it visual art? Yeah, visual artists and writers. And it was just so lovely. There's only 5 people there at a time. But just to say, the original room they assigned me, I was just like, I really don't like this room because it's really dark. I work in New York City. I get little sunlight.
Mhm.
But I happen to poke around because I'm nosy. I'm curious as a writer, and I'm looking at, the little notebooks and things that other people left behind. And I flip open this notebook and I'm like seeing all this writing and like notes that seem really familiar to my book, which is my second book that's coming out next year. And then I realized like, oh my God, this is my mentor's notebook from like the 1990s. And I did this residency in 2019. This is her notebook from the 1990s for her book, which inspired my book.
Wow.
And then I
And
had
it's
to call her up and be
there.
like, "This is your book, right?" And she's like, it had like her grocery list, like
You hear
random
those
notes and things.
stories about residencies. It is a funny thing. It
So you
becomes
just
a
you
powerful thing.
never know. So like I
Yeah,
would not necessarily say like I mean again, unless they specify,
Yeah.
why do you need to be here?
yeah,
But ultimately, like again, they're typically in these kind of remote, rural places. So, the idea is just to be without distractions.
right. But again, if
Um,
they ask you, why are you selecting to apply to this place, you need to know the answer to that question. And I would
yeah. So
advocate
look it up,
that.
look at where they're located,
Absolutely.
look at their mission, so like some might have various requirements attached. Like let's say they might have like a community service requirement where you have to, like Anderson Center actually did, and that kind of got messed up for me. But they had like a community service requirements, and they listed, here are some options that residents do, right? And so, and yeah, definitely, I saw the note on Hedgebrook. Hedgebrook definitely emphasizes the why now. And
Yeah,
if you're not putting that in the application,
Yeah.
if there's not that urgency, then okay, because this other person is saying, I have a deadline and, this is the only time in the year I can do it. I've managed to get, child support, et cetera, to get away from my family. I have to do this thing right now, as opposed to someone like, I just want to spend some time in the woods. I could do it this year. I could do it 5 years from now,
yeah,
right? So look at the mission, look at the location. If you know that, let's say, you can't stand like intense heat, maybe don't apply to the desert
yeah. No, I
residents.
think you have to bring I think you have to do your research. I don't think
Yeah,
it's random. You're going someplace and you're staying under,
yeah.
this roof. Courtney, what about you? If what what in an application does your jury, sort of sit up and go, this is really wonderful? I mean, I know there's no magic dust here, but what are you looking for? What are you not looking for? I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I touched on it briefly already in
Yeah.
that they are very interested in why, an application at this time would be pivotal. So it's thinking about where you are in your process.
Mhm.
But really, I want to kind of I want to backtrack just a tiny bit because something that Kim said has been resonating with me in terms of what a residency might require. And I do think that in the application, do your homework, know where you're applying to. It blows my mind sometimes when people will be accepted and then they'll ask these questions. I'm like, you should know that already. Like, we are in the woods, we are rural. You want to know that when you're applying.
Okay, maybe I was
So,
being presumptuous.
no, no, I mean, I think it's just really important to kind of pay attention to what is being asked on the application, but also to know where you're applying to. But the
Mhm,
other part of it is that the project proposal. So for MacDowell, we do require a project proposal, but I say that because we want you to be thinking about how you would use your time and how
mhm,
beneficial it would be. However, upon acceptance, it could be 6 or 8 months later. There's a very good
mhm,
chance that the project's in a different place or it's a different project, and we really want you to explore. So I know I'm not answering your question, but I wanted to kind
Yeah.
of
Oh,
just
no.
continue
Great.
that thread because I think it's so important to know, is there an output that is required of you? Is there another component that's required of you? And if not, like make the time. Our tagline is freedom to create. We want you to be here and be free to be inspired by the environment, be inspired by the other fellows and residents. I don't know how many collaborations have come out of the
Mhm.
residency experience that is just so fascinating and wasn't an expected part of their kind of application or how they thought they'd use their time in residence. But to back to your question, it really is for us, it's the two components. It's the proposal, really what they're thinking about, and the quality of the work sample.
mhm,
Following if there are specific work sample guidelines, following those. If we ask for an excerpt of a work in progress, we really want the excerpt of the work in progress. So just really paying attention to those details. And I do think there is a sense of urgency in some, not all. I think not everything has to be urgent, and I think that's an unfortunate um, probably nature of our culture where everything is immediate. So I do like it when people are looking at applications and getting that there's a slowness in the process, and it does take time, and it doesn't always have to be something that's urgent, but feels just really important for it to come out into the world. And
mhm.
those are the things that the panel is looking for.
Is there a way, since there are so many different residencies out there, for a person to verify that it's a legitimate program?
Yeah. Do you want me to start? Are you?
Yeah, there's when you mentioned before, there's two search engines that was actually just on them myself last week. Res Artists, and then there's the Alliance of Artist Colonies, I think it is. These are two websites that have databases, and I forget which is which, but one is more US
Yeah.
opportunities and the other shows more international opportunities. But these are two major directories where you can find residencies that are reputable listed, and you can search by all different types of parameters, length, location, if they allow families, etc. And about that, I just want to say that now having a dependent, there are very few residencies out there that actually allow you to bring family,
Yeah.
dependents, etc. And so I know that's really, really hard. Thank you. I know that's really hard for a lot of people. For me, I'll just say how I was able to do it. I did not have, I was single. I did not have any dependents, and that allowed me to do all of these residencies. But I'll also add that I was working 9 to 5 year round. I was not faculty like a lot of my friends, who would teach, during the academic year and have their summer off, and they'd be able to do a residency easily during summer, or they could do it during their winter break, maybe. I would have to like use my vacation days from work. Luckily, I worked in an academic environment, so I got, I think, 4 weeks a year, but I would literally max out all of my vacation days doing a residency. So I would never really get a vacation per se, which is why I was in the pool at Gatto, because this was important to me. This was important that I have space and time to actually work on my work because otherwise I was squeezing it in evenings and weekends. Um, and Yeah, so I use my vacation days. Summer is also the most competitive period because you're competing again with all the academics who get their summer off. But that was literally, the only time I could do it because I was working in admin, working with students, so classes typically wouldn't be held during the summer. So I had to be there in my office, but it was a relatively slow period for my job, but I still had to get two layers of permission. I had to get permission from my boss and from HR because apparently, even though you had 4 weeks, no one really takes 4 weeks on vacation. So yeah,
Mhm.
but that's how important it was for me to make that happen.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean I am struck by the amount of resources out there. Um, and a lot of them cycle. There are ones that happen in the winter or
Mhm.
odd times of year, and they'll often ask you, especially if they have different cycles, when do you want to go? Uh,
Yes.
what's your first choice, second choice, etc. Um, but what is it about going to a residency as opposed to, I'm going to circle back to my original comments though, because you're hitting on something that I think is worth revisiting, which is like, I work from home. I get a lot of work done here, but but a lot of us, yeah, where I'm also working and so forth. What is it about taking yourself to another location, Kim, do you think has been so fruitful for you? What's the draw aside from like the time? Is there other components to it?
Yeah, the job for me was community.
Oh, okay.
Above that was the top thing for me, community, because a lot of residencies, they have at least one communal meal each day. And the conversations that happen, I mean, they're just out of this world. So whether it's all writers, I've done a mix of residencies where it's been all writers, but then it's been like writers, musicians, choreographers, visual artists. There was even one residency where there was like a visiting like circus troupe that came through.
Uh,
So that was fun. So the community by far, and then for me, because I don't like to cook, cooking to me is a huge burden. I've only applied to residencies where they provide meals. Either they cook, some of the meals, but I'm not having to stress out more about, oh, because when I get into my zone, my creative zone, I forget to eat. I
mhm.
can just go and go, and I'm a night person. So I'll be up to like one of my favorite residencies. I was there like I think the latest that I stayed up was like 3 or 4 in the morning working. And then I would get my 8 hours of sleep and wake up, but it was just ideal for me. And the thing is, for me, I don't want to have to think about, oh my God, I have to eat. When am I going to eat? So there's a time when you stop, you go to dinner, you're talking with the artists, other fellows, and then you can go back to work or hang out, whatever you want to do. But there's that kind of communal aspect. But I do want to point out that there are residencies where you're like literally that one person in a cabin in the woods or a hotel in Miami. There's
Yeah.
one that's literally a hotel in Miami. Um, and for me, like those personally did not appeal because there was not the community aspect. So for me, that was my draw. But again, if you want something like that, it exists so that you can kind of get away from your, everyday environments and maybe be inspired by that place, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, what is it about the community component that's so important? And Courtney, do you want to start this time on that question? Like, and also, I'm curious, when you're putting together your cohort, do
Mm.
you take into consideration, do you sort of kind of guess if the of matchmaking or a constellation that looks interesting to the
I
group?
don't do the scheduling, but during the panels, I often am like, ooh, if that person was in residence
Yeah.
with that person and the projects, I love the idea of that. I don't actually do the physical schedule, but we do think about, yeah, we do think about the mix of artists. I mean, MacDowell is a multidisciplinary community, so it's, not just the writers, it's writers and visual artists, composers, architects, filmmakers, theater
Architects,
makers,
yeah.
interdisciplinary artists, like it is a full spectrum, and and these are people at different stages of their career. Some have been to MacDowell before, some haven't. I like to think of the dining room not just about the food and it being provided for you and the chores you don't have to do, but also just about that community, that mix of people who are coming from all over the world, who are working at different stages of their career, and what that conversation looks like around the dining table. I don't know that I actually answered your question, but I got really excited about that.
Kim, what's the draw to you? What's the community draw for you?
Oh my God, there's just nothing like it.
Yeah.
Like, so when I was at Vermont Studio Center, which was used to be, they changed post-pandemic, used to be 60 residents at a time. I'm like a introvert, but I'm a like sociable introvert. So I'm like, ooh, lots of people and all these like weird, cool, quirky people coming together. And so it was like there were only I think 12, 10 or 12 writers and the rest were visual artists. And at the time that I was there, a lot of the writers were kind of like "Rrr," just kind of moody and angsty and just like, oh my God, life sucks, doesn't it? I'm just like, okay, you guys are just on some other thing. Let me hang out with the visual artists because they're
Yeah.
just fun and they're always, even though they're just like, you writer, like we can't relate to you. And I'm just like, but then you're talking about putting words on your canvas and creating a story, people, come on. But it's just, I was there and I was just like, oh my God, this is where we like crazy, kooky, weird people come to feel normal,
That's
you
right.
know? And so
I'm so
if
glad
you,
you said that. Because that to me is like the biggest, like, oh my gosh, the last
it's
time
like
that
you
I was
have found
with a bunch of
kinship.
artists,
You have found
great.
your kinship because probably most of you in your everyday life, unless you're living in like an artist, community naturally, like, you try to talk about to someone about your crazy dreams. You try to talk to someone about your crazy visions, your idea for whatever, and people are just like, huh?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Mhm.
so weird. Like, why would you think about that? Why? That's just weird. And then you get to, the residents, you're just like, oh my God, I'm the conservative one.
Yeah, no,
I need to push my thinking in that direction. So it's just, yeah, it's just such a beautiful,
it
beautiful
is.
thing, the
It's
conversations that you have with
the
people.
thing is that we are not often in situations where we are living with a bunch of artists. It's kind of it for me, it felt like college in the best way.
Yes.
And that is very delicious. And to have your community of people that literally and figuratively color outside the lines. It's like
Yes.
a relief. At least
Yes.
that's how I felt about it, to kind of be with my people.
You're not weird anymore. You're
Not
basically
weird.
like you're normal
That's right.
because
That's
everyone,
I
yeah.
am kind of curious, though, aside from the fact that some places are fully funded, so that makes them very popular. What do you think makes a residency popular? Like why people are drawn to ones that, what makes it a successful residency? What does it provide? Yes, meals, um,
For
clean
me.
but yeah, I mean, like what, aside from the financial aspect, because that's a big deal to be fully
Mhm.
to a place,
Yeah.
where there's a roof over your head and you're being fed, for sure. And maybe there's a stipend on top of it.
Yeah.
But what else, I guess is another way of saying like what should one be looking for? Courtney, what do you think?
Yeah, I
What's so
think
special that makes this place special?
I mean, I think honestly, and I was thinking about this when you were talking about like how do you find if a place is legitimate? You find it's
Mm,
about the residency experience. To me, that's that I think what have other people experienced there? If it's
mm.
been positive, if it's been negative and they've made changes, what are those changes? Are they listening to their community and adjusting as time moves on and needs change of the artist needs change? Are they being aware and having these open and honest conversations with their artists and listening to the feedback and to make the experience better and better. I mean, to me, I think that's something. So when you were talking about like making sure something's legitimate, talk to your friend, talk to other people who have
Mhm.
done the residency. And if you don't know anyone, do your homework, look at the website, look at other artists maybe that have been there that you're like, oh, I work in a
Yeah.
similar vein, I see myself in that community. It just is a way for you to kind of indicate or to feel like comfortable that this would be a good fit for you. And I think also, I mean, obviously it's MacDowell, so I'm talking about longevity. We've been around for a long time, but that doesn't mean we can't still learn from art, like I said, from listening to our artists. So I think that's really an important part of it.
Well, I've noticed, and I guess also in doing some research for tonight, that it's also what the facilities offer, if
Mhm.
Mhm.
especially if so many photographers are coming or dancers are coming, singers, and other musicians. What kind of artist studios are there? And even, for writers, is there internet access for research, or is there a library? Whatever
Yeah.
whatever you think you need,
Yeah.
does that residency have it? I would imagine is another
Yeah.
component of what a person should be looking for. Kim, do you want to add? Is there into that, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really such an individual decision because it really depends on what you want and what you're looking for. But I would also caution you not to be so like rigid and specific, right?
Mm.
Because for example, at MacDowell, I remember, at the point it might have changed, but like because I was there in I think that was 2019,
Mm.
right before the pandemic. They were saying like, our internet is spotty, especially in your cabins. And so when I got there, I was like, oh yeah, I can't even get it on my laptop. I can kind of get it on my phone. If I kind of move it to this one little spot, I get like one little bar, but for me, that was actually a good thing because I write a lot about my work is historical, a lot of it, fiction. And so like I'm always interrupting myself, like, oh wait, what did they do in 1914? Do, and then like 2 hours later, because I've spiraled and looked at other things and yeah, and then 2 hours later, but this time I'll be like, oh, I can't get the internet. Let me just jot down my question on a little notepad and get back to work. So sometimes like the things that you think, like obviously if you have a research project, you need to do research. Yes, make sure they have internet.
Don't come to
But
McDowell right now.
don't go to McDowell. You probably don't. Hedgebrook was like that. There was
Yeah.
like literally one location where the internet worked, and that was intentional.
Yeah.
But so that's again where looking at the parameters of the residency are really important. But again, I would say don't necessarily tie yourselves to
Yeah.
that. Even the food thing for me, like that was a huge component. But I have done residencies where like not that I had to cook like all, but like let's say there were meals provided, let's say Monday through Friday. And then like there was just like a stocked kitchen that you can make your own breakfast, lunch, whatever. Like for me, that was a compromise. But like if there were no dinners, for example, I would probably not do that because it feels stressful, and I don't want to feel stressful.
I know what you need. And also, but I love the idea of also just sort of being open to the new experience and
Yeah,
kind of managing it or navigating it a little bit and letting yourself be surprised.
yeah.
Um, that's a delicious kind of thing to happen and one that we don't
And
get.
even the thing like, I mean, again, I wouldn't consider myself a nature person, but Hedgebrook taught me so much about myself. I mean, I literally sat they have window seats in all their little gingerbread cabins. And I literally sat on the window seats and watched gnats one day outside my window. And I was so fascinated. I'm like, oh my God, are they mating? Like, are they dancing? What are they doing? And I'm just like, those gnats that you walk past on the street, and you're like, they got on your face and you're just like, oh, and I'm just sitting there watching them, and it was like the most beautiful thing, right? So it's like all those little moments are things that can happen on residencies that you can't necessarily anticipate.
It's funny because we're an hour in and we are going to do our Q&A in a minute, but I just want to say the one thing that we really haven't said is like the word disconnect. Like you get a chance to disconnect from your day
Yeah.
to day, um, which is an extraordinary thing. And so it's not, I know for me that to, part from my beloved phone even for a little while is like seems like a big deal, but it's kind of a gift to be forced to not always be on electronics and so forth and find other ways to think. Um, let
I did want to add really quickly, especially considering Courtney is here and we're talking about MacDowell, which has had this really, really, really long history. So for me, like, I mean, don't use my example because again, I worked a 9 to 5. I would have gone anywhere. Like as long as they provided some food, some meals, I would have literally gone anywhere. I don't care. But to be at a place like a McDowell where it's like, oh my God, all of these famous writers were here. and your cabin, they have like these butcher blocks where everyone writes their names and their years. And I'm looking back, looking back, looking back, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't even see the first one. But I was in one of the oldest cabins and it went back to like 1912 or something. And I was like, whoa, all of the creative energy that's been in this one space. And then I see like this name, this famous historical name, someone who'd been there in like I think the 1940s or 50s pop out. To me, that was just like, I'm getting tingles right now just thinking of
Yeah.
it, the
Yeah.
legacy at some of these places or being at a Yaddo and
Yes.
it's like, oh my God, you're in this historic mansion where all these creative talents came. You see all the pictures, and it's like, wait, I'm playing at this piano. I don't even play the piano, but I'm going to sit at this piano and pretend to play it. But like Gershwin played at this piano. Are you kidding me? Like, this is just like, oh my goodness, right? So just to think of all the creative energy and that you are now also part of that legacy. That's some of these long running ones. It's just really special.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. That's a great point. I think we should open up the Q&A. Dorothy, are there some questions there? I see some people were plopping lots of questions in the Q&A, and some of it will be covered in the resources that we share.
Yes, there are some questions. I also did put the links to the resources that HE had put together. It's in the chat for anyone who wants to grab them. And I'll just so everyone knows, probably within the next day or two, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with the resources again, with a link to a survey. And a link to watch the video. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Hopefully tomorrow I can manage to get that up there. So anyway, there's a follow-up email coming with some more information for everybody. Um, First question here is from Yolanda. Can you recommend some virtual residencies specifically or resources for those? I'm disabled and prefer those, but most residencies seem to be in person.
Yeah. I mean, on that resource list that you just put the link to, I think it lists some of those. And it is also, again, uh, do this, do a search on it and do it on a social media search like Instagram if you can and ask around. Unless, do either of you know them per se? I keep seeing them, but I can't
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
I mean, there might be a search category on the two sites that I mentioned. But yeah, I feel like I just saw something even just recently, where it was like stay at home for a weekend. And yeah, I mean, and the thing about those is that even though you're remote, there is the community aspect as well because other people are joining in. And, sometimes I guess another kind of alternative to that would be like an accountability group.
Hmm.
So there's like virtual accountability groups either for writing or art. People just like sit there, with their cameras on or off, but just knowing that they have all the peer support and other people are working on their project at the same time.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
There was a follow-up comment to that question from Yolanda. My partner did the winter online workshop with Tin House this year, now the MacDowell Center, and it seemed fantastic. So, the next question also from Yolanda, how are residency applications similar to grant applications?
Do you
Um,
want to
yeah,
answer
I would
that,
I
Kim?
would say there's similarities because you typically have the same components like personal statement, project statement, and that's where again it can get like the crossover between the two. But it's typically the same components. But for grant statements, sometimes they're asking you to provide like a budget, for the project that you're working on. I've never had to provide a budget because I think all of the grants that I've gotten, they provided just like a flat fee. And so, but it's been typically the same components.
Yeah, they're very similar. They're very similar, but there's no, the grant, you're really making an argument as to why that money ought to be given to you.
Yeah,
So that budget is so important, which you'll not have to provide for at least any resident
yeah.
I've ever seen.
Okay, this question is for Kim. what kind of cadence, in quotes, have you done in terms of when to apply and how you plan, since notification dates vary? And then if you get in, knowing when I'm sorry, I'm scrolling. Notifications vary. And then if you get in, knowing when they'll offer you time, may or may not match what you can do after months have gone by from sending in the application.
So I'm laughing because I'm thinking of that summer of 2019 where I finagled Anderson Center for 4 weeks and did MacDowell for 2 weeks. I remember I told you I had 4 vacation weeks. And then I got in, yeah. So anyway, I would say, the thing is especially if you're applying to some of the super competitive ones, you don't want to apply to just one because you're probably not going to get in. Rejection is a huge part of this game. MacDowell, MacDowell, I was my third time applying
Mhm.
and I got in off the wait list. Which is why I only ended up doing 2 weeks because I did have 6 weeks of vacation because there were some summers that I did not get into a residency. And so, I did like my own writing thing. I went to Curacao twice, 2 summers, for 2 weeks, and I stayed in this woman's like Airbnb. She ended up being a storyteller, was lovely, but I just went there and just worked on my work. So I had like vacation days kind of like saved up. So I actually took 6 weeks of vacation that year. My boss was going nuts, but I managed to come back, in between for a couple of days. But I would say like apply to multiple ones. Like they do have residency fee or application fees sometimes. So within your budget, for that. But then I always tell people because sometimes they're like, oh, well, that's a deterrent. But, just think like maybe that's a pair of jeans or whatever you might buy that year. Like, can you afford 3 pairs of jeans? So, budget to apply. And then, yeah, so I would apply to multiple ones and then you're just waiting and seeing, and typically I'd be so lucky just to get into one of those, you know. Summer of 19 was a whole different story though. I think I got into like 4 or 5.
Wow.
And the thing is, I really wanted MacDowell, but MacDowell had waitlisted me. I really wanted, oh my God, which one did I want? I got into one in like Wisconsin. See, like I'll go anywhere, Wyoming, whatever heck it was. I've never even been there. But it looked beautiful. And then I got into one, I think, in Illinois. And I kind of did this thing where I was just like, okay, I have to accept it by this deadline, but I won't hear back from these other ones. This might be my only shot, so I accepted it.
Mhm.
And then I withdrew. I was like, please, please don't blacklist me. But yeah, I did because I was like, well, I would love to do any of these, but if I had a preference, because again, my time is so tight and limited, I really, really want to do this one for this reason, right? And so yeah, so that's how you kind of work that if you're so lucky,
Yeah,
to get
I
into
know
multiple
several
ones.
people who have deferred, where
Yeah,
they
and
had
some you,
conversations with
yeah.
the places to say, I can't do it after all now. Can I, defer? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I don't know what they do at McDowell if someone,
I actually would love to jump in because I have two
Yeah.
points that from an administrative standpoint,
yeah.
one, being on a wait list is actually a good thing.
Oh.
It's not a rejection. And I will say we schedule for 6 months. So
Mm.
a lot can shift in 6 months. So, and yes, it does mean sometimes it's a late call off the wait list because we're filling in holes in the schedule as people cancel or just as things shift. So one wait list is actually positive. I always I actually have a scheduling Zoom tomorrow with accepted and waitlisted folks. And I love saying like, this is a positive, please take it as a positive. I know it might not feel that, but it's not a rejection. We really want to be able to make the most of our schedule and season and fit in as many artists as possible. So that's one thing. And then the other, of course, now I've lost my train of thought, which is totally fine. Oh gosh, maybe it'll come back to me. Anyway, we can move on.
Okay.
Performance is,
And not saying by any means that being waitlisted, trust me, I was like,
No.
can I put this on my resume?
Yes,
But
no, I think it's actually, I just think I want to encourage I just think let's talk about the competitive nature. I know we're
yes,
getting a
it's
little
super
off.
competitive.
I just remembered what it was, in regard to Jill's question. We do actually, once people have been accepted and, waitlisted, we actually do a scheduling, refresh. So we ask for your most up-to-date information
Mm,
and then we schedule based on that information. So it's not what you put on your application per se, but what once you get that news, then we ask for that. That is not the case for every residency program, but we found we have more success in scheduling people if we have the most up-to-date
mm.
information. So, but competition is a huge part of this conversation, and rejection is a huge part of this conversation. To Kim's point, don't put all of your eggs in one residency basket because, I think our acceptance rate is 5%, with
Wow.
5,000 applications a year,
Mm.
And
three
how many
hundred
come per
artists
year?
a year,
How
300,
many come per year?
300 out
300.
of
Hmm.
5,000. So
wow.
it's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is what it is. So I just think
competitive.
it's so important to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't let that deter you. Don't let the numbers
No.
because you just never know. You just never know. Yeah, I wanted to say also, oh God, what was I going to say about my 20? Oh yeah, I had to also apply for the Fine Arts Work Center fellowship. That was another year, well, almost year-long opportunity, super, super competitive. And I think that was my third time applying over 10 years.
Mhm.
And then I turned them down because something better came along.
Amazing.
The
Yeah.
Bennett Fellowship at Exeter Academy, which came with food. Ha ha ha. Because I like food. But and then I was just like, you could not defer. I had to reapply with a whole new sample, a whole new jury, and then I got back in.
Right.
So, again, the thing is, if you're so lucky to get to a point like that, like my thought was just like, I'll cross the bridge if I even get to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Someone's asking how many do you tend to apply to?
Uh, I think in a given year, maybe like max 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I did last year and the year before. And
Yeah.
cannot emphasize this enough to reapply.
Yeah.
It's really
Yaddle took me three
yeah.
times to get in. I
Yeah.
mean, Hedgebrook, I was like super lucky. I didn't even know what a residency was when I applied. I didn't know how competitive it was. And I have not been, I'll just say this, I've not been able to get back into Hedgebrook. As an alumna resident, I've not been able to get back in. But the first year I applied, and I got my acceptance letter, which I have hanging on my wall somewhere over here because it was that special to me. They said that I think they got 600 something applications for about 30 something slots.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah.
So again, like that's why you put it on your resume,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions, Dorothy?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Um, This is from Shirley. I am looking at a residency for musicians. I have a lot of live performance experience and two well-received jazz recordings. I've been exploring songwriting and have an accomplished partner to work with. Is it safe to assume that the panelists are generally open to artists exploring new creative avenues, or is it better to just build on your main strengths?
That's a good question. Courtney, you want to take this one?
I kind of feel like it's both. I know that's such a cop out, but I mean, yes, you're building on your strengths of who you are as an artist, but the panel is excited when people are exploring something new. And as long as I think it's just important to say, I'm building on something new, and
Mhm.
not just sending something that doesn't match what you've been doing. So that's my take on it, is that it can be both, but just really clarity in the application that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to that question, it sounds exciting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, this one's from Nina. How detailed a resume? I've been around a long time and have published and exhibited a lot. Is, quote, less is more, unquote, better than, quote, more is great, close quote.
I mean, I would say they usually have a guideline for page length. So, don't make your 8-point fonts, and so, but look at the guidelines and I would say put in your most important or most relevant
Yeah.
achievements. And so for me, it's just like when you're applying for a job, you might have like a resume tailored for X type of job versus this one. And for me, I have even different kind of creative resumes, right? Like if I were applying something for something like using my nonfiction and emphasizing that, I'd emphasize, let's say, more of my nonfiction publications as opposed to fiction.
Mm.
Mm.
We only
Courtney?
asked for 5 things. We really, really want it to be pretty focused. And it's really because the work sample is the strongest component of the
Mhm.
application. So, yeah.
Although I applied to something recently that, wanted like a full out resume. And my resume, I've created is like now a narrative with different paragraphs
Mm.
because I didn't know how else to do it. And so I did it that way. It sort of has sections that way. So Nina, you might end up with something like that. Um, but I think, yeah, I agree with Kim that things have to be curated a bit.
Mm. Okay, this is from Glenn. I just got back from a playwrights retreat, a week long, all expenses paid retreat in Palm Springs. In order to be selected, I had to attend a certain number of local playwriting labs in LA and then apply for a spot. It was an amazingly productive week in which we wrote all week, and at the end, we did table reads of our work and got instant feedback. It was inspiring. I'm wondering where you classify these types of experiences as opposed to a residency.
Yeah, so that sounds more like a workshop. So we didn't really talk about like all the different experiences, but I think that's probably one of the other major, I mean, obviously there's like classes that you can take. But yeah, it sounds like a workshop experience. And so like someone mentioned Tin House workshop. So there's a lot of these kind of like week or 2 week long, usually in the summer type programs that you can do, but you're usually getting feedback on your work, so it's not like you're going there to generate work. And so I would say that's probably the main difference, generative versus feedback.
Yeah, and there's one in Key West. There's a bunch of them, right? Uh,
Lots.
yeah,
And
I
they
mean,
typically, you're paying, some have hefty fees. Again, some have scholarships, quote, fellowships attached to them.
yeah, it is a different category. I would say that they are workshops as well. So there's
But it sounds amazing.
it does sound
Sounds
amazing.
really
And there's the ones
amazing.
that are like a combination. Um,
Yeah.
and you can even sort of select a menu of how you want to structure your time. I just saw one that was actually looked really interesting and great. But it was a menu of like you can spend X amount of time for a certain cost to just be there as like a resident, and then there's a other component where you would be workshopping or taking classes and
Yeah.
workshopping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did one in Ghana like that, where the first week was workshops and the second week was, quote, residency.
Mhm.
So first week getting feedback from your peers and instructor, and the second week just generative.
Mm,
Great.
yeah.
The rest of the items in the chat are comments, not questions. But I had a question. You were talking about the importance of community when you go to residencies and how much that has been such a positive impact for you. I'm just curious if, and this is a little different than community, but networking. Like, do you keep in touch with, or have you been able to work with, or reach out to people who you've gone through residencies with? And, you know, because if I'm not mistaken, HE
Yes.
and Courtney, were you in the same, or no?
No, but you and I are meeting with Casey Tromer on
Oh,
Friday.
I see.
And
Yes.
he and I were Bethany together.
Okay, that's who it was. Yeah. Anyway,
And Casey is my dear former work colleague and dear friend.
Just small world. That's great.
Yes,
right. Yeah,
yes.
so I was curious the difference between just connecting and engaging during the residency versus networking afterwards. Is that something that you've found happens a lot?
So my very first residency, 2007 at Hedgebrook, Gloria Steinem was there.
Oh, wow.
And so that's who I had dinner with every night for 4 weeks, Gloria Steinem. And who's just like the most lovely, down to earth. You're just like, what? She's like, oh, she's just like your aunt having dinner with you. But she's talking about vaginas every night at the dinner table. It was just like, wow, this would never happen in real life. This is amazing. And then like towards the end of my time there, I was living in Chicago and just hated it. And I was like, I want to be in New York City. I'm from Jersey, but want to be in the city. I don't think I'll ever get out of the city. And she's like, why don't you come stay with me? And I was like, because we sat around talking about our greatest dreams one night at the dinner table. And I was like, is she serious? Gloria just asked me to come stay with her. And I was like, okay, when? And she's like, you can come stay with me after this, after this session, come in August. And I was like, okay. And so I actually looked for jobs. I wasn't planning on it. I had done it before, looked for jobs, and they ended up landing a job in New York City and moving and leaving Chicago.
Oh,
So I have not seen Gloria or talked to her in quite a bit, but I'm still in touch with her. But I'm also in touch with other people from that very first residency, is that like 20 years ago?
yeah.
Um, and I would say for me, like most of my residencies, I've managed to stay in touch with at least one person. And so like I know like again, having worked with like college students, like networking seems like this kind of like ugly word. It's kind of like fake and cold. But I consider networking, you're just having a chat. You're in the pool at Yaddo. You're talking about your favorite show on Netflix. And because you both write whatever, someone's like, oh, have you heard that they have a call for this? Or let me recommend you for this. Or you'd be a good fit for this. Or I'm recommending someone. So for me, that's networking. It's building relationships with people who have similar interests and similar goals. And so yes, that's such an important part because, when someone has privy to like I'm on a selection committee now for like a literary festival, for example. And like we actually just met this morning and everyone's sitting around throwing out names. Like, oh, I know this person, their book is coming out, but I also know I can vouch for their personality. They're a really great speaker, they're personable, et cetera, et cetera. And we have these connections because we've done so many different opportunities and connected with other, artists and writers, et cetera. So that's another plug, for
Yeah.
why these opportunities are really important.
Yeah. Courtney, do you want to add
I
anything?
do actually. I was just thinking, I'm like, what can I add to this? I
Mhm.
sometimes
You said
I
that they're talking right now downstairs, right?
no, yeah. No, it's exciting to think about there are the opportunities that I can sometimes promote MacDowell Fellows for. So we do obviously our own engagement opportunities in salons and things like that. And I can, oh, this person was here, they were great. But then, I, the writing awards will contact me and say, who can you nominate? Or, so there's also that, which I don't think of very often, but it's such an
Mm.
important part of being able to say, these fellows were here, they were fabulous, they're doing exciting work, give them that grant or that award or this opportunity, consider them. So it does keep going even from this perspective. Yeah.
Mhm. And the alumni community is amazing as well because again, there's that legacy. And so,
Yeah.
once you're done, you're not done, so
Right.
now you're an alumni and I went to one of their events and met my next kind of best friend who's like he just turned 80. I think he just turned 80. He's a playwright, right? Yeah, I've been invited to McDowell's benefits the past couple of years, and it's just been lovely, lovely. The community continues
The
growing.
communities and the
Yeah.
circles keep getting bigger and
Yes,
you're
yes. And
seeing.
it just gets smaller because then you realize everyone at a certain point knows everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yolande has a really important question.
Yes. What sorts of accommodations do in-person residency offer to disabled people?
Mm.
What does MacDowell do? I've heard horror stories. Sorry, my can't seem to see it. Horror stories about accommodations being arranged only for the artist to arrive and the staff refuses the accommodations they'd originally agreed to. This happened to me too.
Mm.
It's awful. We have a care plan. We ask on our application and more so in the scheduling process what kind of accommodations are needed.
Mm,
And if a person identifies specific needs regarding their ability or disability, we will make a care plan for them to make sure we can accommodate them first and foremost. It is an old it is an old campus with older buildings, and so I never want to agree to something that and then have you come and not have what you need. So we really look at what the needs of each individual artist is, what our studio accommodations are. We do have not all of our property is accessible, but we do have studios that are close by. Our main building, our library are accessible. So we make sure we have a conversation first and foremost about what is needed, and there are limits, and so we also want to identify those early on in the process.
Mm.
So yeah.
I just want to say thanks for bringing that up because that's something I have not had to think about, but that's again, especially where you want to look at the residencies like criteria or like specifications, because especially again, since a lot of them are kind of in these remote locations, that might be an issue. So you definitely want to make sure that they can accommodate whatever you might need.
Yeah.
Right. We
Really
do
great
have an
question.
additional question. How does a mom get such an opportunity? Having little community and not much feedback and limitations, i.e., food allergies, kids, religious observance, it's challenging. Is it better to mention this on the application?
Um, I don't necessarily think that that's any of their business, but I think again for you, it's going to be more challenging for sure, trying to find a residency that can accommodate you, especially if you want to bring your kids, because there's so few that allow that. And so when you do go to, I mean, I was just searching for this myself. When you go to Res Artists, et cetera, you can look for ones that are parent friendly or family friendly. But unfortunately, there's an organization called the Sustainable Arts Foundation,
Yes.
and they used to provide funding for two residencies for parents, but they just switched over their funding and I think they're now supporting like Indigenous arts, which is amazing. But now they're like a lot of the residencies used to advertise, we have this parent, one slot, one slot every summer. They've all kind of most of them have kind of like not been able to continue funding those, unfortunately. But I would say like especially if you're looking for community, I don't know where you're located, but if you're like super rural, especially if you're somewhere that's not rural, you want to go to the bookstores if you can, go to the readings, the literary events. Sorry, I don't know what type of art you practice, but you want to be, try to get into those communities that are doing whatever art you practice. And then I would say, especially for you, that's where the kind of virtual residencies are going to help, in the meantime. But, do check around because I mean, I'm looking myself, I'm literally applying to, there's one opportunity literally next summer that I can apply to, right? Because that fits my particular needs. But
Can
yeah,
you
I would
share
say
the name of it?
search.
Just because I'm always trying to pay attention to family
Oh God,
residencies.
it's is it Marble
Oh
House?
yeah, Marble House, and I think there was the Wasaic Project. There are a
Yeah,
couple.
there are some other
Yeah,
ones, but I need childcare,
yeah,
right? And like
yeah.
and that's even harder to find.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's like and it's for a certain age and
yeah.
yeah, so literally there's one opportunity, but I'm gonna apply and if I get rejected, I'm gonna try again because that's what I do.
We
Mm.
are going to have to wrap up. And that's why I said at the beginning that we could do this hours in a week and do our own residency about a residency. These are great questions. Thank you so much. And I cannot thank Courtney and Kim enough
Thank
for
you.
showing up today and sharing your expertise. And thank you so much, Dorothy, for hosting this with ACOR. Please feel free to send additional questions to ACOR. And if you have any ideas for other things you'd like us to focus on in other professional development presentations, let us know. Thank you so much for coming out, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful night.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.